Hi, it's Friday evening, October 10th, 2025. And what I want to talk about here is the Gaza peace plan, or the Gaza pseudo-peace plan, I think would be a more accurate way to put it. Um, I did some thinking about this because there's been a lot of confusion, and um, and there are, there's sort of news reports that say this is a real breakthrough, that they're going to have an exchange of prisoners and hostages and so on, and that this is the first step on resolving this terrible crisis that we're in. So I thought what I would do is go through some articles that I ran across and some things that people that I've listened to that I won't cite any specific names, but I thought I would just give my thoughts in this whole situation and also give some commentary on some of these articles that I ran across. So first of all, I got an email. I'm on this woman. Her name is Caitlin Johnstone, and she lives in Australia. She's been writing for years, and she's got a very unique perspective, which is based on, I would say, her spirituality, based on her own real sincere and deep inner spiritual work to heal her own wounds, so to speak. And she applies that not just in terms of her the post that she makes regarding spirituality, but more specifically regarding to geopolitics and politics in general. So, and just happens that her views and mine are pretty much in accord. So I'll kind of read through some of the things that she says here. She talked about the fact that as soon as this peace agreement was reached, Israel has continued to pound Gaza with military explosives. In fact, I just saw a news item that said that Israel had just either killed or injured 70 people. They're buried. Many of them are buried under rubble in Gaza. This is just before the peace plan officially came into effect. It reminds me of, to be cynical about it, reminds me of sale ends on Friday, October 10th. So be sure to cash in. Well, get your savings now. Kill some more Palestinians while there's still time. This is kind of the Israeli attitude towards them. So he says it does appear that the killing and abuse will at least diminish for a time, which is an objectively good thing, no matter how you slice it. The first stages of the agreement reportedly entail a partial withdrawal of IDF troops, Israel's starvation blockade officially ending, humanitarian aid being allowed into the enclave, and both Israel and Hamas releasing captives and stopping the fighting. On the other hand, according to Hamas sources, subsequent ceasefire phases will entail, this is according to Hamas, no surrender, no disarming, no mass exile, but most of all, a permanent end to the war. So there's that. And she goes on to say it remains to be seen if there will be any movement towards a lasting ceasefire beyond the first stage. When an agreement was reached late last year, it never made it beyond the first phase, and then the Trump-Yahoo, she conflates these two, Trump and Yahoo administration declared a siege and resumed the killing. So the far-right members of the Netanyahu regime certainly seem like they don't expect the ceasefire to hold, and in fact I was listening to the news report which says that they adamantly oppose the ceasefire in principle. He says Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said that Israel has a tremendous responsibility to ensure that this is not, God forbid, they say that with some degree of irony, a deal of hostages in exchange for stopping the war, as Hamas thinks and boasts, and that immediately after the hostages return home, the state of Israel will continue to strive with all its might for the true eradication of Hamas and the genuine disarmament of Gaza. The National Security Minister Ben Gvir, who's another major hawk, issued similar remarks, saying that he and his Jewish Power Party will use their not exactly the this in the U.S. they have a party called the Peace and Freedom Party. He's got the Jewish Party, Jewish Power Party. So I think they have a kind of different outlook on things. Will use their leverage to dismantle the Netanyahu government if it allows the continued existence of Hamas rule in Gaza. So you have Hamas saying we absolutely will not disarm, and the Israelis saying we won't, continue with the ceasefire if Hamas does not disarm. Netanyahu himself has been studiously avoiding any talk of commitment to a lasting ceasefire, mostly limiting his public statements to the significance of freeing Israeli hostages. And I might add that there's a clip of President Trump who was asked about this point, and he said, well, yeah, we need to go ahead, and he was very vague about it. He says, but we got to get the hostages out. The reality is that's all the Israelis want. They just want to get their hostages out so that the public gets off their back, and then they can resume the killing, which 90% of the people in Israel apparently support. So she says there's not a whole lot to feel optimistic about here. If the killing does stop on a lasting basis, it'll be a pleasant surprise. I would agree. But what's interesting is that some commentators say one particular commentator is very popular and is very he is very very perceptive person, former military guy, and he spent a lot of time in Israel actually, and he says that Hamas has basically won. So people have different opinions, but I would respectfully, based on what I'm seeing, I disagree. In any case, it says she concludes by saying that it will be nice for everyone to have a breather. If things really do calm down, I'm going to do something I've never done in my entire writing career, take a full weekend off. So she's a very dedicated writer. She writes something pretty much every day, actually. And it's, covering all this is very stressful because it's, we're just watching this horror, in real life going right in front of our eyes. And any person with any kind of human consciousness, has to be upset by it. So that's the first article. The second one is an article by it's a website that's, I think they offer science courses actually, but they have an editorial page. And this page is this article. It talks about Donald Trump's 20-point peace plan, and I'm going to kind of just scroll through this. It says Trump's ambitions, peace plan as an ego product, which I think that's quite accurate. The plan is viewed as a fusion of U.S. superpower influence and Trump's personal ambitions. Driven by a desire to be remembered as the peace president, Trump is reportedly motivated by the goal of winning the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, it turns out that I just heard, just hot off the press, is that this woman who ran against Maduro, the Venezuelan President Maduro, I think her name is Machado, just won the Nobel Peace Prize for being a loyal servant of the global empire. Like Henry Kissinger. This is what the Nobel Peace Prizes come to. And Trump wants to be part of that. Well, he's in good company, if you think about it. If he ever gets it. Anyway, Trump's broader global ambition. Trump has claimed that he could end the Ukraine war in 24 hours and seeks to resolve 7 global conflicts, including the India and Pakistan conflict, and I might add the Thailand and Cambodia border dispute. So I just saw a interview with the spokesperson for the Thailand foreign ministry, and he said basically what he said was, this is a dispute between Thailand and Cambodia. And President Trump, you are wonderful, we love you, but it's none of your goddamn business. You're just stay. This is for us to solve. And when you get involved in things, you just mess everything up. That was what he was actually saying. I will say it without the diplomatic, veneer. Anyway, so it goes on to talk about the limitations of Trump's Gaza peace plan. He mentions that his approach lacks patience, diplomatic effort, and nuanced understanding of the conflict's complexities. Now, here's the thing. On the one hand, he's right that Trump does lack nuance and subtlety in terms of how he thinks about things. But on the other hand, the conflict between Israel and Palestine is not complicated. It's a story of a bunch of Europeans who got the imprimatur from the British Empire to go into the middle of the Middle East in Palestine and set up a state that is going to destabilize the whole Middle East for decades to come in order to satisfy Western imperial ambitions. And if they end up genociding, millions of Palestinians, well, that's just part of the bargain. No, too bad. So it's not complicated. He talks about it's a dependence on negotiation. The plan named Redeveloping New Gaza leaves key details to negotiators and relies heavily on Hamas's acceptance. Well, guess what? What this peace plan is. They even say it. It's a redevelopment. It's a redevelopment plan. So this is like urban renewal. You've destroyed a city with over 2 million people. You've starved to death or bombed hundreds of thousands of them, or injured them. Most of these people, half the population is children, and Trump is just treating this. Trump and Witkoff, his real estate guy, and Jared Kushner, his real estate son-in-law, they're all real estate people. This is just a real estate deal for them. And those pesky Palestinians, we got to figure out a way to get rid of them. That's basically what this peace, quote-unquote, peace plan is about. So the key provisions of the Gaza peace plan are security and governance. Gaza will be de-radicalized and terror-free. Well, let's look at that. De-radicalized. So the idea of liquidating entire population is a rather radical idea that it seems to me, which is held by the Israeli government. And if anybody's going to be de-radicalized, it would be the Israeli government. And then it says, and terror-free. Well, who's being terrorized here? Tens of thousands of people, if not more, have been killed, injured, starved, and we're talking, and they're supposed to be the ones that are causing the terror. Give me a break. Hamas and other factions will have no role in governance or military activities. Okay, so now, in 2006. The United States and Israel had this idea that they wanted to break up solidarity within the Palestinian movement. So they said, we should have elections in Gaza. And they they encouraged Hamas to be in those elections. And they were hoping that they were hoping to undermine the authority of the Palestinian authorities. But to their chagrin, Hamas actually did win, even though they didn't really even want to place a candidate. Apparently, they were cajoled into placing a candidate, and the people said, the Palestinian Authority has done nothing for us. We're living in a concentration camp. As Norman Finkelstein, if you watch his video, several significant Western authorities referred to Gaza as a concentration camp, and yet Hamas has no right to rule over the people that elected them. So this is more democracy, Western civilization style. It says Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and disarmament will receive amnesty. What they're saying is capitulate, and maybe we won't kill you like we've been killing your other leaders. That's what they're saying. Gaza will be governed temporarily by a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee overseen by the Board of Peace, chaired by Trump himself. So the head of this redevelopment project is Trump, the real estate, shyster, real estate developer, and the Palestinian, the apolitical Palestinian committee they're puppets, just like the Palestinian Authority gradually became puppets of the Israelis and the West. So then there's going to be this other thing called the International Stabilization Force. And this will secure the borders and train Palestinian police. Are they going to secure the borders from the Israelis? Not likely. While the Israeli Defense Forces will gradually withdraw as Gaza becomes secure. In other words, as they stomp out any sense of resistance to the hegemony of the West, the IDF will gradually withdraw. And then they talk about a ceasefire and conflict resolution. Upon sides agreeing to the proposal, the war will immediately end with an immediate ceasefire, freezing all military operations. And we know how consistent Israel has been in keeping its agreements, and that is none. Humanitarian assistance. Immediate humanitarian aid will include water, electricity, hospitals, schools, and rubble clearance. Well, it'll be great if they do deliver humanitarian aid. I mean, they're desperate for food and medicine and so on. But Norman Finkelstein just reported he's written 13 books. He was denied tenure at a university because of his anti-Zionist point of view, and he pointed out that this event that has happened has not been the first slaughter of Palestinians over the years. There was an earlier one where the Israeli military went in, bombed a bunch of buildings, killed I think like several hundred people or 1,000 people, something like that, which was considered unacceptable. And but it resulted in I think he said 600,000 tons of rubble, of debris, as a result of the bombing. Then there was another one where they did the same kind of thing. They went in again. This is called mowing the grass, because the population is just getting a little too big, so we're going to mow the grass, kill some people to keep those Palestinians down. And another, what was it, 20, I think it was 20 million tons of debris were the result of that bombing, and another couple of thousand people were killed. But this latest attack entailed dropping the equivalent of 2 Hiroshima nuclear, that is atomic bombs. So we're talking about the Hiroshima bomb, I think, had the equivalent of 12,000 kilotons, or roughly 25,000 pounds of explosives, of TNT, and he's talking about 50. So there's 50,000 tons of TNT. But he said that in terms of rubble clearance, the city, the area of Gaza, there's several cities there, but the total area has been so heavily bombed that it would take 100 trucks many, many years to get rid of just the rubble before they could even begin to rebuild. So that's another data point here. Trump's, this is called an economic reconstruction and development. And Trump's economic development plan aims to rebuild Gaza, offering a special economic zone with preferred tariffs and access rates to attract investment. And my comment on this is that when investors come into a place, they are looking for a return on investment. This is not a charity project to build Palestinian, restore the housing and the hospitals and all the things that the Palestinian people wanted. They're looking for a return on investment. So this has nothing to do with helping the Palestinians. Then it goes on to talk about the political pathway and statehood. Reconstruction and reforms will prepare Gaza for eventual Palestinian Authority control, and Palestinian Authority is already, they're like quislings to the Americans and the Israelis, that is, traitors to their own people, collaborating with the enemy, or you could say the equivalent of the Vichy government in France during World War II that cooperated with the Nazis. To create conditions for a credible pathway towards Palestinian statehood. So here you've got Gaza. It has been completely decimated. It's going to take years and years and years to create any kind of infrastructure at all. High-rise apartment buildings, streets, plumbing, electricity, all the things that human beings require in a modern civilization. And it's going to take years and years and years for that. So, and what's the other part of Palestine is the West Bank. And the West Bank has been taken over gradually by these rabid Zionist settlers who are violent, and they're causing trouble all the time. They're attacking Palestinian villages and settlements and killing people with impunity, and as a result, the area of actual habitable Palestinian territory within what was known as Palestine has been reduced to such a small amount that it is completely unrealistic to consider a Palestinian state, and yet they keep talking about the two-state solution. It's just dreaming. It's not going to happen. It goes on to talk about reactions from stakeholders. So the Arab countries, there are Arab states that have praised Trump's efforts. They have avoided endorsing specific provisions, demanding a two-state solution, which I've already said is unfeasible, that includes Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem with unconditional statehood. I've talked about Gaza and the West Bank. Jerusalem used to be, the original Jerusalem was, of course, Palestinian. A West Jerusalem, where the newer Jerusalem was built by the Zionists, but they've gradually encroached on East Jerusalem, kicking many people out of their homes just summarily. So they show up at somebody's house, they say, "Get out, it's ours now," and the people have to leave. And so the idea of having an unconditional statehood, how can it be unconditional when they've destroyed the capacity for the city, for Palestine to be a state? So he goes on and he says, Israel has not rejected the plan, but Prime Minister Netanyahu opposes Palestinian statehood, I would add, in principle, and may use Hamas's non-compliance as a justification for military action. So they're, it's like, it's like you attack somebody and then they try to defend themselves, and then you say, "Oh, you attacked me, so I'm gonna shoot you." This is the Israeli attitude. So Hamas is highly unlikely to accept an unconditional surrender. Why would they? What do they have to lose? Or disarmament, viewing the plan as one-sided. Well, for sure it's one-sided. They're basically, Israel is basically demanding a capitulation from them. And the only thing that it appears to me that they're getting out of it is a respite from the bombing, so that they can get at least maybe 2,000 Palestinian prisoners back in exchange for 20 still living Israeli hostages and 20-odd bodies of hostages that died in captivity. So the challenges in the implementation of the plan is the disarmament difficulty. Disarming Hamas is extremely challenging due to their commitment to armed struggle. Their commitment to not being lined up against the wall and shot. That's what their commitment is. Supervisory bias. Trump's perceived bias perceived bias. He's like, when Netanyahu shows up in Washington D.C., they all give him, standing ovations. And when Netanyahu went to sit down at a table, a Trump obedient butler that he is, pushed in Netanyahu's seat at the table. So, Trump is Netanyahu's obedient servant, and he's supposed to be, unbiased here. It says Trump's perceived bias towards Israel may lead Palestinians to reject his chairmanship of the board. Have you ever heard of something called conflict of interest here? Then we talk about funding, and it says rebuilding Gaza cost $18 to $20 billion, and international donors are reluctant to provide the funds. Yeah, well, in one sense, they're talking about investors coming in who have no interest in Palestinian rights, and on the other hand, donors are not. Well, there's nobody who wants to help the Palestinians. So there you go. Then it talks about an international force. Deploying an international force is logistically and politically complex. That is true because, as one commentator said, everybody wants guarantees, but everybody wants the guarantees for themselves, but nobody's willing to offer the guarantees. So then he goes on to talk about the experience from Ukraine, and Trump's previous quick peace claims in Ukraine failed, suggesting the Gaza plan may also face implementation challenges. So that's the second article, and then the third article is by the World Socialist Web Site, which is it's an anti-imperialist website. I don't always agree with their politics, but they're anti-imperialist, and so I thought I should include what they have to say. And and they go into it's a very thorough article because they cite mainstream media in this article. So Israel and Hamas announced Thursday the formal adoption of a ceasefire agreement involving the release of all hostages held by Hamas and the permanent Israeli occupation of Gaza. Hamas political chief Khalil al-Hayya announced an agreement has been reached to end the war and aggression against our people. In reality, the agreement is yet another step in the Israeli imperialist plan to dominate Gaza and suppress the national rights of the Palestinian people. It turns Gaza into a colonial protectorate supervised by a board led by the American president and involves the permanent Israeli occupation of a large portion of Gaza. So another commentator that I mentioned at the beginning said that this is a complete win for Hamas, and yet the Israeli government is only withdrawing from part of Gaza, which is not a big area anyway. Gaza has been effectively occupied by the Israelis for decades, and yet they're saying that the American says it's supervised by a board led by the American president and involves the permanent Israeli occupation of a large portion of Gaza, when in fact it has been in effect occupied because it's a concentration camp. If you're surrounded by guards, you can't go in, you can't get out, food doesn't come in, medicine doesn't come in. If you're deathly ill, it's very difficult to get out. So is that an occupation? Just because there aren't soldiers on the street all the time doesn't mean that it's not being occupied. He goes on to, the article goes on to say, Al-Hayya declared that we received guarantees. Oh, guarantees. We know about those guarantees, don't we? From the mediators and from the U.S. administration, and everyone confirmed that the war has completely ended. The very people, the article says, the very people who provided these guarantees, however, facilitated the Israeli bombing of Qatar last month that tried to kill this guy. So what is this fellow al-Hayya saying? They tried to kill him during a process of negotiations, which are supposed to guarantee your safety, and yet he's saying he's depending on these people for guarantees. Good luck. The government of Saudi Arabia hailed the agreement, declaring this important step will lead to urgent action to alleviate the humanitarian suffering, achieve a full Israeli withdrawal, restore security and stability, and initiate practical steps to achieve a just and comprehensive peace based on the two-state solution. So in other words, they're blowing smoke here. There's not going to be any two-state solution. The Saudis have given lip service to Palestine, but they've effectively done nothing. The only state in the Arab world that has actually done anything at all is Yemen, and Saudi Arabia was actually starving and attacking Yemen, in earlier years. So the Saudis, they talk a good game, but they are firmly in bed with the imperialists. That's the reality. Why would it be any different? They're billionaires. You think when has a billionaire ever been a true philanthropist? Please. It will do no such thing. It will only cement the illegal Israeli occupation of Palestine and permanently position Israel to strangle Gaza's food supply in order to facilitate and continue its plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza. A particularly foul role has been played by the bourgeois nationalist governments in the Middle East and the broader region, including Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, which we just mentioned, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates, which endorsed the deal and agreed to implement it. And, Turkey is another example of this. Erdogan says, Israel is so bad, so bad, so bad. Hey, keep that oil flowing from Azerbaijan because we're making a lot of money from transit fees. So on the one hand, he could shut down the Israeli military if he wanted to by simply shutting off the oil, and he won't do that. So he talks a good game, and this is the whole problem with the Arab leadership. They've been betraying the people for literally decades. As part of the agreement, Israeli forces will withdraw to a so-called yellow line, amounting to 58% of Gaza. I heard numbers like Gaza will have control of 70%, but whatever it is, Israel is still partially occupying this land, physically occupying this land where they shouldn't even be there in the first place. Israeli forces would retreat to a buffer zone inside of Gaza. Why can't the buffer zone be outside of Gaza so the Palestinians actually have some access to their own land? No, can't do that. They control all land crossings into Gaza, leaving the population subject to the threat of further deliberate starvation. The deal inscribes a return to the open colonial domination of the Middle East that prevailed in the 19th century. Gaza is to be governed by a board of peace that would be headed and chaired by President Donald J. Trump and include former UK Prime Minister and, I might add, war criminal and liar Tony Blair. Okay, they quote some mainstream sources. The Washington Post gloated that the agreement is a Hamas surrender and a Trump triumph. So you have the guy from the head of Hamas, the spokesperson for Hamas, saying it's a win. You have another independent commentator saying it's a win for Gaza and for Gaza and for Hamas, and yet Washington Post is saying it's a Hamas surrender and a Trump triumph. He posted, "Call this deal what it is, a total Hamas surrender. That is worth celebrating," is the Wall Street Journal. Joining the gloating, declared, "Hamas is giving up its best leverage, but Israel isn't. Even after the hostages are ransomed, Israeli soldiers will remain in more than half of Gaza, including by the Egyptian border." It concluded, in accepting these terms, Hamas effectively acknowledges its defeat. As the Wall Street Journal made clear, the pause in the fighting will create the conditions for the next offensive. If the new Gulf Arab-led stabilization force, I call it the repression force, they should be repressing Israel, instead they're quote-unquote stabilizing Gaza, be deployed in Gaza, fails to disarm Hamas and demilitarize the Strip, Israeli troops will be in a position to do so themselves with what Mr. Trump calls full backing. So the whole thing, this is just it's a fake peace deal. It's so skewed in favor of Israel and the West that it's blatantly obvious, and yet people cling to the idea that it's a win when, yes, you gave some straws to the Palestinian people, but what is the consequence of all this? The Israelis have lost 1,200 people on October 7th, 2023. They've lost several, probably maybe 20,000 Israeli soldiers who have been injured or killed going into Gaza, and they've faced resistance from Hamas. The Israeli economy has been decimated, and probably 1 million Israelis have left because they're, they can see the writing on the wall, and they don't want to be around there when the whole thing collapses completely. But the real losers are the Palestinians. How can you say Palestine won when they've lost probably at least a couple of 100,000 to higher estimates are 600,000 people? That's like 600,000 out of a total of 2.3 million Palestinians is these are World War II Holocaust numbers we're talking about here. The newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, counseled Trump to show the same. This is where it really gets good. The newspaper counseled Trump to show the same aggressiveness he has used throughout the Middle East to escalate the U.S. war against Russia. Oh, you mean we are in a war with Russia? We're just escalating the war with Russia. Thanks for telling us. We didn't know. We thought that this was a war between Ukraine and Russia. I didn't know that the United States had anything to do with it. If Mr. Trump now reverses his strategy on Russia, next year, even the Nobel Committee might find it impossible to deny him the Peace Prize. And, what may also happen is we may have a nuclear war when Trump sends Tomahawk missiles into Russia, and Russia responds by sending Oreshnik missiles to Washington or London or Berlin or Paris, and the whole thing explodes and we get a nuclear war. These people who are running our country and running the media are just, they're out of their minds, if you ask me. Condemning the peace agreement, so quote unquote, when it was first announced, the International Center of Justice for Palestinians, that is the ICJP, wrote, the plan's inclusion of an international quote unquote board of peace ensures the exclusion of Palestinian voices from the decision-making of Palestinian futures. A spokesperson noted, this plan offers Israel yet another opportunity to pause, rearm, and then return to violence with renewed impunity. He added that it is steeped in colonial rhetoric. The Associated Press reported that the United States would send an additional 200 troops to Israel to monitor and oversee the agreement. Why is it that the United Nations is not empowering a group of 20,000 people? Indonesia has offered a peacekeeping force to protect Palestine, and that doesn't even come up in the discussion. Why is the United States, which is clearly a party to this, they have a deep conflict of interest, and they're sending in 200 troops as enforcers, basically, to oversee this quote-unquote agreement. It reminds me of that saying by Smedley Butler, the Marine Corps general and two-time Medal of Honor winner, who said he was a gangster for capitalism. Because that's what we're talking about here, sending in U.S. troops to oversee the carving up of a sovereign area that was never supposed to be attacked by Israel in the first place, and here we are. The 2-year-long Gaza genocide has led to the deaths of at least 65,000 Palestinians. That is the official number of people whose bodies they've found, but we're not talking about the the buildings have been blown to such an extent that there's literally thousands and thousands of people have died, and unless if you starve to death on the street and you're left unburied and the dogs eat your body, you're not going to be counted. So a more realistic number that people have been talking about is closer to 600,000, not 65,000. And the destruction of the vast majority of buildings in the enclave. Gaza has been shattered and its population has been starved. A study published in The Lancet, this is a British medical journal, this week estimated that 55,000 children in Gaza are acutely malnourished. Surprise, surprise. Among the children surveyed, 16% showed signs of wasting caused by lack of food. So these are some articles that talk about these kinds of things. Here's my basic take on it is this. Here you have Israel, which was founded on the basis of the Balfour Declaration. So the British Empire is trying to get its ugly claws into the Middle East, and they weaponize the Jews of Europe who had been experiencing anti-Semitism and were looking for some resolution to their problem. And the possibility was Uganda. Palestine obviously was another option. The Soviet Union actually offered a homeland to people, to Jews, and there actually is in Russia. There is a region of Russia which is an official Jewish. It's a place where the Jews can go if they want to. So it's not like the Jews didn't have a place to go, but you see, the British really wanted to get their hooks into the Middle East, and so they said, we're going to offer the Jews a homeland, and of course they're not going to infringe on the rights of the Palestinians. Oh no, we wouldn't allow that kind of thing. So, but of course they were lying through their teeth because the British always lie. Tony Blair, he lied. The British lie about everything. They were called perfidious Albion, which means you absolutely cannot trust these people. And who are the two offspring of the British Empire? Palestine and the United States of America. And what did the United States of America do? These people came from Europe, and they had this big continent. There's all kinds of space in it, but there was this little problem that there were people living there that were in the way, and they're racially inferior. They're red-skinned savages, and who cares what their culture or their thinking is or anything? They're in the way. They're on the land that has resources that we want, and we'll either kick them off or kill them. And that was the American response to the problem of indigenous peoples. And the Israeli response has basically been the same. Just kill them or get rid of them. So, and this is British colonial policy. They did this in country after country. The Aborigines in Australia were the same thing. They killed, tens of millions of Indians in the Indian subcontinent due to their manipulation of food supplies and deindustrializing that country. They caused the Irish potato famine by taking the food away from Ireland, and the people were starving to death. So these are the three countries that are causing and have caused, massive suffering for several centuries, and here we are, and they're still, causing a lot of trouble. So, what is the solution to this? Well, we're seeing there's some solution developing. At least the British population is asking serious questions about this. There's been some big demonstrations. The United States, there's some opposition to it. Norman Finkelstein he spoke in front of 500 students at the University of Massachusetts. 500. You need 500,000 people going to Washington, D.C. and saying, would you please kick these people from the American-Israeli Political Action Committee out of the country, put them in jail for being foreign agents. They're violating the Foreign Agents Act. You should put them in jail. And this is the kind of civic action that should take place, but it's not, because there's a real lock on the freedom of expression and the ability to organize and solve these problems. So that's the problem, the situation that we face. And in Israel, if you're on the side of peace, your life is you get beat up on the street. So and in Britain, the same thing is happening. Little old ladies are getting kicked to the ground by the British police and arrested. So you've got a real, these democracies, so to speak, are showing very strong indications of totalitarianism, and that's the situation that we're in. As the empire feels threatened, it becomes more desperate and more brutal. So that's what we're facing. Okay, that'll be it for now. I want to thank you all for listening to what I have to say here. I hope my commentary has been informative and stimulating for you. And if you'd like to support my channel, please, you can sign up as a subscriber, or you can make a donation to PayPal, or you can buy a T-shirt on my online stores. And thank you very, very much for listening. Please like and share this with your friends. I feel like I'm giving commentary that you might not find in other places. So thanks again for listening, and I'll see you soon.